Redditors who have been falsely arrested, what happened and how did you handle it after you got out? I was walking home one night after spending the day at my buddy's house. It was like 10:30 at night. I was 15. I walked past a house party. I knew it was a house party. I could hear the music, see people in the front lawn, etc. I didn't care. I was walking home. And then bam, sirens and police cars. Apparently the cops had gotten a tip that there was drugs being sold at the party. I just so happened to be right in front of the house when the cops came. I was arrested. It helped that I stuck out like a sore thumb. No one from the party knew me. Cops put 2 and 2 together and they called my parents to come get me from the jail. Cops spent a long time explaining I was just really unlucky. Clarify some things. I was never charged with a crime. I was detained. I was transported to jail along with everyone else. Once I got to jail, I was briefly questioned by a cop. I explained my story, explained that I had nothing to do with the party. The cop verified that was all true and released me. They called my parents because it was thought that I had to be released to a legal guardian since I was detained. It also helped that I was stone cold sober and everyone else wasn't. I do like that the cops realized their mistake with you and put in a bit of effort to try to make sure your parents wouldn't go ape crap at you about the ordeal. An acquaintance decided that his dwindling supply of chronic was going to be expensive to replace, so he decided to grow his own. He acquired all the proper equipment, lights, containers, etc. Blacked out the windows in his basement and went at it. He wasn't much of a horticulturist and had read that he should test his environment with tomato seedlings. He planted his crop, nurtured it and encouraged it to grow. Unfortunately, his crop failed. About the time he intended to give up the endeavor, the local high sheriffs decided to raid his place. They captured all his expensive equipment, and most damning of all, the crop. When I saw him, he was sitting on his couch, hands cuffed behind his back and was chuckling to himself. I asked him what was so funny, and he told me to just be patient. He called the next day to tell me all that I have related above and his plans to sue the cops for false arrest and destruction of his equipment and his tomato crop. Last I heard, his case was settled out of court for around $20,000. Not the tomatoes. Not me, but my wife. She had a medical emergency while driving and got into a serious accident. A witness said she was swerving. She was incoherent and they found a bottle of pills in the car, legally prescribed to her. They arrested her for DUI at the hospital, despite the tox screen coming back negative. The doctors at the hospital were able to determine the cause of the medical emergency, but the police didn't care. They sent blood to the state crime lab for additional testing, which also came back negative. The police still didn't care. We showed for the trial date and the prosecutor was so confident that he was going to be able to bully her into a plea deal that he didn't actually prepare his case or notify his intended witnesses that they needed to be there. He tried to ask for a continuance, but the judge wasn't having it as the prosecution had agreed to that trial date in writing, so the charges were dismissed. All in all, it was a pretty terrible time. I've had my own run-ins with the law when I was a teenager, but I had always been guilty and this completely different. To have to watch my wife go through this and see the police literally not give a crap about the truth. It was disgusting. They just made their mind up right away before even fully investigating and refused to admit they were wrong. The one bright spot in the whole ordeal was the judge. During the process I had several opportunities to sit in court and watch him as presided over other cases, and he was absolutely awesome and always extremely fair and compassionate. And there's no way to give the police and the prosecutor any consequences from this. That bothers me. Presumably the good judge will value future charges from that prosecutor based on this one, but that's a small cost. I was arrested for a DUI. It was almost understandable. I was driving away from a bar where I worked, smelling of beer. I had beer spilled on me, and I could agree it wasn't a big deal except I got taken to the jail, and on 2 different breathalyzers, I blew a 0.00. The cop told me that he was still going to write me up as a DUI because he was getting off in 20 minutes and didn't want to drive me the hour back to my apartment or call the tow truck to bring back my vehicle. I had to stand before the judge the next day, who instead of throwing out the case, gave me a court date, said that I wasn't allowed a public defender. They had no idea which tow truck company took my car. I had to spend a week looking for it. then pay for storage. I was left without insulin overnight. I hit a high of 680 when they finally got a nurse to check it. I had to pay for a lawyer out of pocket, and by the end of it, instead of a DUI I had a too fast for conditions. I was 5 miles under the speed limit, had my face plastered on the town who got arrested this week paper, had the cop who arrested me stop by my apartment to tell me to just plead guilty, not to bother with a lawyer, and they'd go easy on me. Wasn't arrested, but got a phone call from a cop asking me to come to the station regarding a taxi ride last weekend to Reynardton. I was a straight-laced, nerdy teenager who never got in trouble for anything, so it was pretty shocking. Thankfully, I also very much knew I hadn't taken any taxi rides in recent memory, so there's no way they wanted me. I remembered there's another guy in town with the same name as me who also happens to live out in Reynardton and suggest maybe the officer wanted him. He threatened some kind of legal action if I was lying and hung up, presumably to check. He called back a little while later, only slightly apologetic, asking if I had the other guy's phone number. I received a visit from the police last year about an incident of assault. No one was home, but Hay called me while I was at uni and gave me the rundown and asked me to come in. I thought it was in relation to someone I play softball with because they shared a name, so I went in. When I got to the station I was arrested on the spot. It was civil, but it was basically so if I incriminated myself, it was on record. It turned out there was an incident in July where a drug deal went bad and the dealer, with whom I share a name with wildly different spelling, went to the guy's house to get the money and a fight broke out. The real kicker was that I wasn't even in the state when this happened. I was playing softball on the other side of Australia with 15 people who could place me there. As soon as I showed them the plane bookings, they quickly and unceremoniously unarrested me and asked me for help to find this other guy. I'd been mistaken for him before with people adding me on Facebook, so I pointed them in that direction and they let me go. The worst part about the whole thing was my mates giving me crap afterwards for not getting a photo in handcuffs getting shoved into a car. Not me, but my dad. One day, I was at home, eating Taco Bell. I was about 6 or so, when the police came knocking at the door. My dad was drunk, but he was at home, so that wasn't an issue. I'm not sure what he was being arrested on. I just saw my dad being taken away in handcuffs. Turns out my dad's twin got in trouble and gave the cops my dad's info and never went to court. My mom was frantically screaming he has a twin. It's his twin, and was pulling out pictures to show, but they weren't having it. Got my dad back. No idea what the final conclusion of that story is. Hope this satisfies your curiosity a bit. I can try to ask my mom to see if she will tell me what happened. Yay, tell us, I am interested. Worked for major university as a parking Nazi for about a year. After students leave, we spend 2 weeks cutting all the leftover bikes off of bike racks. Thousands of bikes each summer. Fall rolls around. Kids come and claim their bikes back, or for $40 bucks get a new one for the year. Rinse and repeat year after year. The paperwork is horrific, and inventory is crappy for years before I get there. Bikes come up missing. Duh. I'm accused of being the mastermind of a bike ring when 3 locals show up with fake IDs. I was never trained to spot fakes, nor did I really care, and I give them 3 bikes. I am interrogated and given leave with pay till the investigation is over. 4 weeks later a warrant is issued for my arrest. I get a lawyer. $2K, and a year later, I plead guilty to disturbing the peace and spend 8 hours of community service at the local animal shelter getting pets adopted. Life pro tip: be patient, and a good lawyer is worth every penny. It is if you have money. The rest of us are fucked. Nobody was arrested, but we, my fiance especially, were kind of hassled, I guess, for no apparent reason. We lived in the States for a few months last year. We had just been to the park with our son and were driving home, minding our own business. Suddenly, we were pulled over by 2 police officers. We weren't speeding or driving recklessly or anything, so we had no idea what it could possibly be about. The officer asked my fiance and I to both step out of the car. A female officer asked me if I knew this person, my fiance, and was I with him under duress. I told them yes, I know him, and no, I'm not with him under duress. We're a family and we just came back from a picnic in the park. My son was in the back of the car crying his eyes out. and the officer who was speaking to my fiance yelled at him to shut up, which just made him cry more. My fiance said whoa, he is 3 years old, and the police officer didn't like that one bit. Started yelling and cursing his head off at my fiance about how it's against the law to disrespect police officers. Unfair. The female officer recognized from my accent that I was not from the States, so I told her that we were both Irish citizens. I'm a natural born citizen and my fiance is naturalized, and we are just living here for a few months for my fiance's job. As soon as they heard we were Irish citizens, their whole demeanor changed. Suddenly they were our best friends and were super polite and friendly, wished us a good day and went on their merry way. It was the weirdest freaking thing. The only reason I can think of that they pulled us over in the first place is because I'm white and my fiance is brown and IDK. I guess that's suspicious. It's like a rule in the US that the cops have to hassle brown people whenever they can. They change their attitudes because they know they can frick their own citizens without recourse, but if they go too far with foreign nationals, the State Department gets involved. I'll tell you what happened with me. I was a carpet cleaner and did lots of houses. One day I get a call from the next county sheriff's department. They wanted to ask me some questions. I had nothing to hide and wanted to be helpful, so I went down there. They accused me of stealing $30,000 worth of jewelry from an old lady whose carpet I cleaned. They already had a warrant, so I was under arrest. I got out on bond and had to sign in every day until trial to prove I hadn't skipped town. It never made it to trial. The lady found her jewelry. Of course I sued and settled for a third of what I wanted. That money kicked off my drug habit that lasted almost 20 years. I used to love law enforcement. Their dirty tactics to try and get me to confess to a crime I didn't commit turned me off. Not the most exciting story, but here goes. In my city, we have an annual anti-police brutality march that usually degenerates into quite the shitshow. One year, I was 5 feet away from a group who flipped a cop car in the downtown core while shoppers got locked into the nearby mall for their own safety, and police were shooting tear gas canisters and pepper spray everywhere. The year before that disaster, things were actually somewhat tame. I'm a journalist and at the time, I was working for a university paper. I was following the march along when it was stopped on a major street. I could see some broken store windows up ahead and saw some riot cops moving in. Being young and inexperienced, I wanted to get a closer look, take some photos, keep an eye on the cops who have been known to be not gentle in these situations. This was a very stupid idea. I'm standing on the sidewalk and a ton of riot cops come rushing in. One of them uses his shield to push me onto the street, where they surround us in a tactic that's become known as a kettle. A few minutes later I realized what was happening. Mass arrest time. I called my editor to let him know what's going on and was basically told there's nothing I can do at this point but wait it out. Stood there for the next few hours, just interviewing people as we prepared to get processed. Finally, they brought in a bunch of city buses and one by one, they searched us, took our bags and cuffed us. Hours later, they drove us out to a station in the middle of nowhere, took our mugshots and gave us each $500 tickets for obstructing traffic. I had bruises on my wrists for a few days from the plastic cuffs, which are very uncomfortable. I contested the ticket and had to go to court about a half dozen times. Huge pain in the butt, but was ultimately a valuable lesson. We had major student strikes here a few years later with massive riots, which I covered extensively. I was the only one of my friends to not get arrested that summer. Oh, Montreal. Not me, but my brother-in-law, arrested for possession of M when a packet of broken rock candy fell out of his wallet, in front of an officer that was checking his ID, after his box truck broke down on the side of a highway on a work trip. He knew it was bull, so he gave them heck while he was in there, joking around and confusing the crap out of them. He was quite incensed that he, a non-violent and compliant person, had been manhandled all the way there, while a belligerent drunk woman was practically carried into the neighboring cell and was given an extra mattress. They tried to pin him with a felony, saying he had something like 3 pounds of drugs with him, and threatened him up one side and down the other, all the way until he bailed himself out and was done with the paperwork and processing. I drove 4 hours, actually 5, because traffic, with my pregnant sister to go pick him up, because his boss and friends ditched him and took all his stuff with them. They even smoked all his cigarettes on their way back. We picked him up, crashed at a high school friend's house, and when we took him to the bond place and next morning they were still talking a real big game about fines in the thousands and court dates and jail time. But when he asked about his court date, they only had vague and mumbled responses. They never contacted him, but they made a point to scare the crap out of him until he was gone. A club I used to go to sold shots that came with tiny bags of pop rocks that stopped once cops came in to do a drug search and found tens of baggies and people putting them in their drinks. Years ago, we were having a get together after the bar at our place. The cops showed up because we had a crazy neighbor who would admit to the police she can only hear us when she puts her ear to the wall, but even that was too much for her. Anyways, my husband opened the door. Cops asked him to step outside. Cops noticed he'd been drinking. Said they were taking him for public intoxication. On our front porch, they checked his ID and say he also has a warrant. This seemed odd because he had just paid off his warrants but thought maybe he had missed one. Whatever. Court date was a year and a half later. We had to pay bail and court fees. Before the court date, the public intox charge was dropped. When he finally went to court, he found out the warrant was for him but for his brother. Even after proving it wasn't him, they made him pay IT. I know I'm late to the party and doubt this would be seen. I was 17 walking home from my crappy waiter job at a reception hall. It was 2 AM. On the way home there was a school that had recently been shut down. It was a shortcut I always took to save the extra 10-minute walk. As it happened, my friends were in the school trying to find ghosts. I got arrested exiting trying to get home. In my street, 4 houses away, I pleaded with the police to check my phone records to show that I hadn't been in contact with them or to call my employer to prove I left work 20 minutes earlier, but it wasn't enough. All my friends had said I wasn't with them, but it was still enough to get a court order. Fast forward 2 months, and explaining the situation to the magistrate, they gave the arresting officers a stern look and told them not to waste taxpayer money and suggested they learn how to investigate better. Thousands of people are in jail wasting taxpayers' money. When I was around 19 or so, my parents' house got broken into. Of course they put the blame on me. A few days later I was at work and I was called into the office. I worked at the family business. I walked in and looked at this guy and said, "What can I do for you, detective?" He gave me this look of WTF. "How did you know I was a cop?" Right off the bat he asked if I had a guilty conscience. I told him no. His suit jacket was doing a poor job of hiding his gun. Let's just say this got things off on the wrong foot. He tells me he has proof it was me. I said okay, present me the evidence. He told me he can't tell me at this time. I said okay, well you are totally full of crap and wasting my time. He had no evidence because I didn't do it. I started walking away and I was detailed. For the next hour he grilled me, swearing up and down he had proof it was me. I finally got it out of him that he claimed there was video evidence and fingerprints. I said okay, well I lived in the house for 18 years, I am fairly sure you will find my fingerprints in all sorts of places. The video was horse crap because there was no cameras around. He goes on to say that if I just admitted that my father would drop the charges. Which really had me confused because why am I being questioned if he just wanted to drop the charges? I knew my father and if I had done it, there is no way in heck he would drop the charges. I had the detective call my girlfriend at the time to confirm I was with her. Now he starts saying she was involved. I was at the bar the night in question so I had multiple witnesses. I also lived an hour away so it's not like I broke into his house when I took a peek kinda thing. After a while he realized he was going nowhere, took off the cuffs and told me to not leave the area. I told him that he has no court order, I am not out on bail, and I am an adult so I will go anywhere I dang well please. He said he was going to arrest me, again with no evidence. Interestingly this entire time he never read me my rights. Which I really expected since he was trying to get a confession out of me. I don't remember how much longer it was after that, but I finally went back to work. I was very pissed at my father and told him he better pay me for the lost wages. Needless to say I never heard from the detective again. I have no idea what happened to the case. My father never brought it up again. Fairly sure he still blamed me for it until the day he died. Nope, didn't do it. Your dad sounds like a real C. Not arrested, but cops got called on us while we were moving. They put us in the back of fire squad cars for several hours, then let us go when they figured out we were just moving. Lead cop says get your crap and get the frick out of here. I don't want to see you again tonight. There's a lot more to the story, but that's the gist of it. Comma not arrested, but cops got called on us while we were moving. Comma get your crap and get the frick out of here. I don't want to see you again tonight. This cop knows exactly how moving works. As a former law enforcement and someone who interned for the First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston and interned for the Boston Police Department, I am always disappointed in overzealous police and prosecutors. It was my interning in Boston that reinforced my idea of getting out of criminal justice system altogether and focus on business plan. With this said, even I was arrested as a cop. I was working UC for a prostitution sting near the airport hotel. Sure enough, the FBI made a huge arrest of everyone there and I was caught up. My directives were to not break cover, so my department let it ride for 2 goddamn weeks. Here I am UC and put in the sheriff's department central lockup. I was next in line for arraignment when I was pulled aside and my people informed the FBI that we had an UC operation going. USDA was super P about me possibly messing up their drug bust when I was trying to stop sex trafficking. It was my last time working or helping Vice because those bastards could have let me out well before then. They wanted to see how I handled it. Years later I found out 9 of the 12 of the Vice squad were dirty. Humans are crappy. Power tips people over the edge. Frick people in power. I was falsely arrested when I was 19. I went to pick my now ex GF from school, saw a school police officer at the entrance. I pass him and he immediately flips his lights on and pulls me over. Once pulled over, he taps on my window and asks for my information. I just didn't really care, knowing I did nothing wrong, so I don't argue and just complied. He spends the next 35 minutes in his car, and I see 2 more cars pull up. I was asked to get out of the vehicle, and he starts searching me and my car. He grabbed my wrist and I turned to ask what is happening, to which I was greeted with his pistol in my face. Finger on the trigger. I turn back around and he yells, "Are you gonna resist?" I just say nope and let him do his thing. 1 police ride later to the jail, I find out he claimed I had a warrant, which I did not. I had one like 7 months prior for missing a court date, which I had taken care of and had the documentation in my car proving so. This happened on a Friday night, and apparently no judges were present to let me out. I was held until Monday, where I was released. The record later showed that the reason I was arrested, and still shows if you look it up online, was that I illegally passed an emergency vehicle. Turns out my dash cam came in handy, where the prick found the paperwork and ripped it up, stuffing it under the seat. The aftermath? I just let it go. Yeah, it sucked, and yeah, I was put into the system for no reason, but it wasn't all bad. The worst part was them taking my shoes, socks on the cold floor and the stale bread for dinner the first night. I did make a complaint about a month later, but he had already resigned. Walking home from my girlfriend at the time late at night. I was about 17 UK and it is way past 11 PM. Also walking around 6 miles to get home. Halfway home the police pull alongside and ask me to stop. I've headphones in and kinda daydreaming because I've still a good 30 minutes of walking to do, so didn't hear or even register them. They pull forward a bit, jump out, and in seconds I'm on the floor wondering what the heck just happened. They put me in the back of the vehicle and start asking me a ton of questions about drugs and alcohol. I answer honestly and they genuinely don't believe me because I was walking funny. Got me to do a breath test which came back 0.0. Then they ask me what I was thinking while walking down the street and I tell them I was a writer and pretty much live in fantasy all the time. One laughs out loud while the other buckles up. They offer me a lift home, which is good as I've been in the back of this car for 30 or 40 minutes by now. Get home and they offer to walk me in. However, I point out the street is super small and hard to turn around in. So I jump out and help them turn around. It was a ridiculous street, ESP for parking. Full family job to get my mum's Vauxhall turned around, open front door and wave them off. Dad is there smoking a joint and asked who I was waving at. Good guy, always waited up for us to get home. Both parents do ridiculous amounts of weed though. If the police walked me in we'd have been in major trouble. I just smile at him and say friends. No point giving him another heart attack. Other than that, Been stopped hundreds of times while walking home from work doing fast food closing shifts. One car caught me enough times they just offered me lifts home when they saw me walking. Even in the middle of days these guys knew me so well they'd just pull over and we chat for 10 minutes then offer me a lift. And yes, I've seriously considered it might be the way I walk. I'm kinda paranoid about it now. I was detained but not arrested. I was a senior in high school, heavily pregnant. We had about 2 months left of school and I was due for a baby during finals. I used the bathroom 3 times a class period if the teacher would let me. Apparently my teacher before lunch called the cops on me as I was yanked out of my last class and brought to the holding room. They demanded I tell them what I was doing in the bathroom during civics class. I laughed. Peeing. I'm pregnant. They gave me a dirty look. Make this easy on yourself. Tell us what you did now or sit here all night. I peed. Then I went back to class. Who was with you? I pee alone. There was a girl washing her hands but we weren't together. Big mistake. They searched me. My locker that was empty. My purse. My backpack. They found nothing. Give us what you have now or go to jail. I handed them prenatal vitamins and a granola bar. They also watched me pee. First they refused to let me use the restroom, but I told them I would pee on their chair. A large male police officer stood there and looked closely as I used the nurse's bathroom. They kept me until 7, even though class ends at 2:30. I missed work and nearly lost my full-time job over it. They never told me why they were searching me. They just kept screaming at me until they told me to. Just go. You are useless to us. Just go. You are useless to us. That's fine. You're useless to the community. At least I don't waste taxpayer dollars doing it. Me. If I were in your exact shoes and also not worried about any of the consequences of what I say, as well as being able to muster the aggression to say it. So, not something I'd reasonably say but definitely what I'd want to say. Around 2 or so years ago, I was super sick. Long story short, I was suffering from a really serious eating disorder. 2 girls in my college decided to make fun of me while I was in a bathroom on campus. They were doing their hair or something. In a campus bathroom they were using curling irons. It was odd. And I came up to the sink and they started saying crap like how people like you should just die. You're disgusting. I'm gonna catch the disease and the like. We got into a bit of a spat and then went our separate ways. A few hours later I was arrested by campus police for assaulting them. They said I literally had run out of the bathroom stall and began beating on them. I could barely stand up during this period without fainting and needed to use a cane. But I ended up having to go to goddamn court on battery charges and I was persuaded by my lawyer to take a plea deal because he said since there were 2 witnesses, the girls, versus just me, I would lose. So I ended up on probation for a year while I was admitted to treatment for my ED the first time. The charge is not on my record anymore because we found a new, better lawyer who was able to overturn the conviction or whatever, but I have a very deep-seated dislike and fear of police and other uniformed workers now. I was in high school and picked up my then girlfriend from her job at a grocery store. I was waiting in my car listening to music with the engine off. She came outside and I tried to start it and it wasn't working. 17-year-old me thought I ran out of gas. So I take my gas can out of the trunk and walk to the gas station, get gas and return. I put the gas in, try to start it and nothing happens. I figured I need a jump and didn't know anybody willing to help me at that hour, so I throw the gas can in the backseat and we walk back to my girlfriend's house. We are hanging out for a few hours. Around 2 AM we get a call from one of her co-workers telling us that the grocery store is on fire. So we run over there and watch her job burn down. The cops come over to us and talk to us to ask why we are watching the fire and usual cop questions. I explained to him that is my car in the parking lot, the one with the gas tank in the backseat, and my girlfriend works here. The cop told us it is cold outside and we can wait in the van if we want. This sounds ridiculous now but it made sense when we were talking to him. So me and my girlfriend step in the back of the van and he freaking locks us in. 30 minutes to an hour later they pull us out and question the frick out of us. They let us go after they pulled up the cameras and watched some butthole light the store on fire. He didn't like the Mexican community moving towards the white neighborhood and decided to burn it. Feo. It's like a kidnapper with sweets, but with big kids and promises of warmth. Not me but neighbor. He has custody of his kid, my friend, every second weekend, and it was his weekend to have him. I knew this and I went over to his house on Friday at about 5-6 p.m. to play some video games with him. We were about 13 years old at the time. The dad had a previous argument with ex-wife and she called the cops saying he kidnapped my friend. Cops surrounded the house with guns drawn and ready to bust down the door. Me and my friend just gaming, not knowing this is going down. His dad got arrested immediately. I just remember turning around and cops had his face on the wall cuffing him. My friend got taken back to his mom for the weekend. It was eventually resolved in court, but I don't know specific details as I was pretty young when this happened. What a bee. I was stopped on the way to a friend's house before a hike. I stopped at a convenience store and was boxed into my parking spot by a cop. The officer knocked on my window after I rolled it down asking why I was being boxed in. He told me I was on drugs and he needed my pulse. I'm not making this crap up. I gave him my license and registration and he pulled me out of the car by my arm. He kept repeating "you are on drugs" and taking my pulse while pushing me against his car. Eventually he cuffed me and shoved me into the cop car saying I needed time to relax. He and his partner then searched my car. They literally cheered when they found allergy medicine and shouted, "Frick yeah, we found something." I told them I hadn't taken anything. They took my pulse again and asked why it was high if I hadn't taken drugs. I said that it is high because I'd just been cuffed by 2 cops who were saying I was on drugs. I then said I had been with my mom for an hour and then come to this store. I offered her number if they needed it. They told me I'd made an illegal left turn. I said they were wrong and they threatened me. I asked if I could go and they said to get out of here. I asked for my back and they gave it to me and told me to leave immediately. I said that I was going into the store to get snacks for the hike. This is probably number 5 on my worst experiences with police, but it's so dramatic that people tend to get a real story from it. My friend drove past the PD going under the speed limit. They pulled us over and searched the car. They found some soap in a vial my friend made in chemistry. They thought it was a ball of sea. They did let us go but confiscated the sea soap for testing. LOL. The funny thing was we were all rolling our balls off at the time. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.